snail mail, which never, ever, ever, ever wants to quit, will run until you die. Oh, man.
All set?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's 1 o'clock. Lunch is over. Hi, my name is John Joergensen. I'm here with Elmer Masters from CALI, and we're here to talk about RECOP, Owning American Case Law. What we're going to do, I'll start out, and I'm going to do a brief rundown of what RECOP is. I suspect most of you know already, but I'll run down through it anyway. And then the main part of the program is going to be Elmer and I both talking about things you can do with RECOP in order to make it available to the world or just to make it useful. So, RECOP, what is it? It is a weekly archive of the court decisions of all 50 states and appellate courts, and so all of the circuit courts and the U.S. Supreme Court. It's about 68 jurisdictions. I am told by Carl Malamud that he's spending, what is it, $36,000 a month in upkeep to make this available. The purpose behind it is, well, according to Carl, what he really wanted to do was to shame the U.S. government and the state governments into making their material, their court decisions, and important legal information generally available in bulk to the world. Alas, they know no shame. Exactly. So it'll go on for as long as it can, and if it can be carried on by diverse people after that, hopefully it will. He'll keep it going for as long as he can. So it spans from the beginning of this year through January 1st till now. Comes out every week. It's marked up in very simple XML, which I'll show you in a few minutes. Again, very basic, very easy to manipulate. And the data is supplied by Fastcase, one of our vendors here at CALI this year. Organization of the material. In each weekly archive file, you'll see either 1 or 2 subdirectories when you unpack it. A lot of times they'll just be slip opinions, but sometimes there are paginated cases and slip opinions. Paginated ones are ones that are being sent to West that will appear in the regional reporters. And that's how they're organized. The slip opinions are just organized purely by jurisdiction. So I've talked about this. Nice, Elmer, thank you. So I talked about why Carl is making RECOP data available. What is Rutgers doing with it, and why are we doing anything with it? We wanted to create a useful and easily maintained database for general searching by jurisdiction. We wanted just to make the stuff available in as convenient a manner as possible. Interestingly enough, I didn't really anticipate anybody really thinking of doing anything else. Elmer has a very different take on the material, and he's going to talk about his online law reporters. So it's a very different kind of thing, very interesting. So what we do at Rutgers is we take all this material and we reorganize it purely by jurisdiction, mainly taking those paginated cases that have been organized by regional reporter, identifying which state each one pertains to, and lumping it together. We put it all together in single directories by state. We've taken the XML fields and we've utilized it for fielded searching, and we format things for web display, and we're also doing some link resolution of all the internal citations to make it nice and useful. What we do when we take care of it, well, what I'd like to talk about now is how we're doing it, and The programs that I'm talking about, like this unpack.pl, it is a Perl script. I've done pretty much everything for this in Perl, and using the Swishy search engine, which is a lovely freeware search engine, cross-platform. And I've put this all, I've made it all available on GitHub, and I'll have the link for it appearing when we get to the end of my part of the presentation. So the main program I have is just called Unpack. That undoes the archive file. It identifies all of those paginated cases by state, and it copies everything over into common directories by state. You don't have to do anything. All you really have to do is just download the archive file and start running it. For example, Alt-Shift. So this is the Unpack file, and there is a tar file that came in this week. That's really all there is to it. This is going to be unpacking this tar file, and in a couple of seconds it's going to start saying, identifying each XML file that it's unpacked and where it's going to, and where it's sending everything. The next thing you have to do in order to maintain this system is just run the update script for updating the Swishy search engine, and then wait for next week. So there's not a whole lot to it that's very difficult to do. So Unpack untars the archive, puts it all to where it needs to be. The only other thing it does really is the MD5s. I don't really have that in. I'll put it in very soon and put that up on GitHub as well. It's a very small thing to do, but I realize that I actually haven't done it yet, even though I was planning to. The only other thing I do is I insert a Unix style date, a millennium date, so the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970, which is what the Swishy search engine prefers to have for date range searching. So since that's stuck in there, as it goes through the update script for Swishy, Swishy takes that and creates a secondary index on that, and date range searching is possible. Again, Swishy, freeware, cross-platform, it works very well for us. A lot of people are liking Solar nowadays, which is it works very well with Drupal. But I still use Swishy. One of the things that had to be done in order to make this work very well, which was a little bit tedious, was making Swishy indexes. As it goes through and does the indexing process, it creates an index that can be searched. In order to make individual indexes, you have to have individual Swish index config files. And so since there are 68 jurisdictions covered, there has to be 68 Swish index config files. So part of what's in my GitHub archive of little utilities, along with Unpack and the Swishy update script, is a little run once script that will create a suitable index config file for Swishy for you. And you just need to say where you want it put, and it'll create them for you. And then there's a single search interface. I have a sample modified Swishy CGI file, which has everything set up in order to do searching of those 68 indexes, and a search config file, which will allow you to search one or all. You can select whatever jurisdictions you want to search. So what to do with the XML files? Keep it simple. I just use XSLT proc and CSS. The XSLT proc gets rid of it, just makes it look presentable in HTML. And then I apply a standard style sheet, which we also use for other case law databases that we have in our system. So they all look the same. And then display CGI, one of the nice things about Swishy is it's very highly configurable. So once the indexing is done, by default, it will just recall the path to the document that's been indexed, but you can substitute things. So we've substituted a small CGI script called display.cgi, which again, I've made available on GitHub. And it grabs that XML file, filters it through XSLT proc and the XSLT style sheet, and converts everything, converts all the citations into links, and then just makes it all available to you. The style sheets, the XSLT style sheets, all of that is packaged together and is available on GitHub. All you really need to do, if you want to do the very same thing that I'm about to show you on the website, you can just download it, put it all into place, and it should work. So here's where you can go to GitHub to download everything. Of course, bulkresource.org is where the RECOP weekly files become available. And the last one there is actually a link to our search engine. Which, if I get this right, I can just show you quickly. So, the sample search page that I have, again, on GitHub, I've gotten rid of all the Rutgers stuff from it. But it's very easy to search. So, like automobile. And let's select some jurisdictions. Get a bunch. Now, where I'm going to show you the XML, which I'm about to do in just a minute. Swishy, in the index config files that I mentioned earlier, you can tell it what tags to look for. They can either be well-formed HTML meta tags, if you've got HTML docs, or they can be just any kind of XML tag. And so I've told it to look for things like short name, which is the XML tag in these documents for the basic caption, like the Blue Book caption, the date of decision, and the jurisdiction. So what you see here is actually the results of that. As Swishy indexes the files, it creates secondary indices on all the fields. It tells you that you told it, actually, to make secondary indices on. And then it can make use of them in displaying your search results. So that short name is right there. And that's what gets displayed as your main link. The court, the jurisdiction, date of decision, where it's reported, if it's reported, and it just displays doc size. It'll also show you a keyword in context display if you so choose. Then if you just click on one of these things, then it comes up. So this is just being filtered through. You can see, actually, on my system, I'm calling it states.cgi because I wasn't thinking of the federal jurisdictions at the time, but it works the same way. So it's filtered the XML through XSLT proc. Very simple, very quick, actually, even though there's a lot of letters in XSLT proc. And then it made nice little links out of all of the citation data that's in there. And you can just go through and read the document. As far as actual searching goes, so you can see how those secondary indices are used when you're doing something like making a good search results display. So you can tell right away what jurisdictions you're dealing with, captions of cases, date of decision. You can also do things like let's put that in parentheses just to be neat. So it will, in fact, search on the secondary index of short name. So you can do really good fielded searching and get nice results out of it. And again, you can click that, and you can see everything that's available here. This is a nice link to Cornell. And here's something like Michigan versus Long. And this is something else we also got from resource.org, the U.S. reports going back to volume 1, also available, and you can see same style sheet pretty much, so it looks all the same. One big collection. We own it all, and we're going to keep it forever. And anybody who wants to do the same thing can do it real quick, real easy. So that's what we're doing with RECOP data. And Elmer is going to talk about what CALI's doing.
Does anybody have any questions for John?
Pardon?
You said you were going to give us a code link at the end of your part. Which link?
Oh, the code link was actually at the last of the code link to download the codes right here.
And of course, John will be loading his slides to his session description later today.
Absolutely. Because I never forget stuff like that.
So you feel strongly about owning the data?
I feel really strongly about owning the data.
Very strong about owning the data.
And you all should feel really strongly about owning the data.
Did you intend that as a lob or just as fun?
You're toned down today. Yesterday.
Well, there was beer yesterday. Well, what's the future of libraries? Of course, I have to say this because I say it every time I do a presentation at CALI. What is the future of law libraries in the United States in particular? I can see a day, especially once the new ABA accreditation standards are in place and librarians don't actually have to be librarians anymore. What is to stop an IT department and a library having to merge and becoming completely electronic? And then why do you need professional librarians once that's done? Here in the age of Google, where nobody comes up to that reference desk anymore, I know because I sit on one, and everybody thinks they know the answer to all of their research questions because Google will give them an answer, and that's usually good enough for everyone. And everything we can rent access to. So why bother having anything? Well, you know, again, 100 years from now, what is the commercial situation going to be for any legal material? And is it our job to care about that at all in any way? I suggest to you that as librarians, as law school professionals of any kind, we need to be really concerned about that and actually maybe do something about it. Everything that you saw me just doing, I'm talking about identifying metadata. That's traditional librarian work. How to make stuff available quickly and easily without hassle. And acquiring the stuff, owning the material. Well, this is available for free, pretty easy. All you really need to do is just download it. And then just keep it, even if you don't want to do anything with it right now. But you can make it available to the world quickly and easily and actually own it forever. Imagine if we all owned an electronic copy of all primary source legal material. Well, Carl made it available, at least in this one limited instance, as best he can do. Let's do it, and let's start collecting it. So that's me.
There you go. I think I got it. I almost had it sorted out. Okay, I think this will.
And thank you, Ben. No, and actually that's one of the problems with the RECOP project, and one of the reasons why Carl has online expressed some dissatisfaction with the librarian community response to it. He is paying, like I mentioned earlier, he's paying about $36,000 a month of grant money that he received to Fastcase in order to make this stuff available. And he's going to do it for as long as he feels he can justify it. Well, as long as he can, within the parameters of feeling that he's justified doing it. And at this point, he's actually wondering if he's justified in doing it because so far, I believe Elmer and I are the only two people bothering to do anything with it, which is, again, one of the reasons why we're presenting on it today. If it's going to move forward, people have to step up.
That's right.
And Elmer is going to have a lot to say about that.
Hello. Cool. There we go. Hello, I'm Elmer Masters, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Director of Internet Development, or it could be Internet Technology for CALI. I've been working with Caselaw since 1995, actually. I built my first Waze harvester to track down and attempt to index Caselaw I found laying around the web in places like LII and Washburn. So it's been a long time. And interestingly enough, it's not easier to do today than it was in 1995. Actually, it might be a little bit harder, thanks to PDFs, but that's another story. Come to the next session, and I'll rant more about PDFs there. What I'm gonna do today is actually take a look at a couple of things that we're doing with the Caselaw that are actually different than, we're actually doing something totally different than what John's doing. Totally. Well, not totally, because we are indexing it. So right now you can get at all that Caselaw, just over 100,000 cases at this point since the beginning of the year. Think about that. Although they aren't all from this year. Some of them, especially the stuff that's in the paginated parts of the National Reporter System, some of that goes back 2 years. Now, I don't know if they're just getting around to just printing it or what the lag is, although that wouldn't terribly surprise me. So actually some of it goes back quite a bit longer than just this year. I'm going to fall over that. So we've been building all that Caselaw into something that we call the Free Law Reporter. Everybody got one of these in their bag. This contains about 700 ebooks, because what we've been doing with with all that code, or all that Caselaw rather, is converting the XML into HTML, specifically XHTML, stuffing it into Solr, which is a search engine, open source, runs in Java. I'm beginning to like better than Swishy, though I'm a big fan. I used Swishy for a long time. But I'm beginning to appreciate the power of Solr. Not so much the Java parts, but that's okay. And then we also take that HTML and the metadata that's in the XML files, and we use that to create EPUB-based ebooks that are viewable on just about every reader, every platform out there. Anything that can open EPUB files basically will work. So the way that we're doing that, and we're actually trying to make all this code freely available too. So it's actually on GitHub. Yes, that is one of last year's flying monkeys wearing a scarf. Or no, actually, no, I think that's just his blue cape. So Now, the reason I've put it up on GitHub is so that people can get at it easily, because, you know, like John said, it's pretty straightforward to get a hold of this data and to work with it. You will notice, I'm going to get up the laser pointer. Is that working? Wait. Oh, never mind. You will notice, though, that I work in PHP as opposed to John's Perl, but I don't hold that against him. But generally, actually, I do pretty much the same thing that he does. I mean, the stuff gets. I actually unpack it with a shell script before it gets this far, though. But I could do it in here. And then we do a couple of things as we parse the XML into bits. Most of it then I use for both for identifying the ebooks and for creating unique IDs in Solar. So, for example, I generate a unique ID for each case based on the Free Law Reporter URL. And then just basically from there, it's just a matter of going through the XML, stepping through the files, and then going through the XML, and then using the simple XML libraries in PHP to pull that file apart and reassemble it as XHTML. And it's important. I really wanted to do this as HTML5 because that'd be really cool. But it turns out that the EPUB format will only support valid XHTML documents right now, EPUB 2, which is what I'm using. So I actually had to put everything into valid XHTML. So we build those. We take a lot of the metadata that's identified in the XML, and we add it to we add it as meta tags in the header of the case. And then we loop through stuff as necessary. We do. I also include a link to where the EPUB that's getting built from this that contains this case, where that EPUB lives, and then in the EPUB, there's a link back to you can find the document again. And obviously, we don't keep them on example.com. You would have to have your own stash of ebooks, but also not a bad idea. We run tidy, which cleans up the HTML and actually makes it valid for XHTML. And then we use curl, again, another PHP library, to basically feed the new HTML document to the Solar search engine. And then that Solar is then set up to track all of those metadata tags and index them, as well as indexing the body and that sort of stuff. Right. And that's and then that then gets us all the HTML files and we can actually see those. You can actually walk the directory it starts at 1 and currently we're up to 23. So you can actually look through. We'll take a look at Connecticut. And then the valid HTML files. And then these are just really plain and not styled. And I don't do anything to the content of the actual content of the opinion. So you get things like the page breaks that are put in when they're, because the way that all this is being done is PDFs are being rekeyed in China or someplace like that. So a little scary, I know, but that's what they're doing. So they put the page breaks in by simply saying page 3, and as they get through the whole thing. So needless to say, the most popular word in the entire Solr index is? That's right. Followed closely by court. Also not very odd. So those are in there. I was going to pull them out because if I want to do things like number paragraphs for universal citations, you need to get rid of strange things like these page numbers. But you know, that would take me about 30 minutes of processing time to go back and refresh that and update the indexes. So at some point, when somebody settles on universal citations, I'll probably go back and do some of that work. But on the other hand, if you need to cite this slip opinion, because these are all slip opinions that I'm showing here, you're going to need to know what that page number is anyway. Because certainly, I wouldn't recommend citing to the Free Law Reporter. Not yet, anyway. We can also do, we can do some searches. Let me show you what the sort of final product looks like. Well, actually, before I do that, let's take a look at because I only got you halfway through the process. We've converted the XML into HTML. And then we're going to use this PHP script to take it. Basically, what it does is it uses a PHP library to create EPUBs. Now, an EPUB file, which you know, will work in iBooks and works in the Nook and works in a lot of places, is really just a zipped archive of a bunch of HTML files and some XML files that tell you what order to show the HTML files in and contain the metadata and stuff. So it's actually not terribly complicated in terms of you know, sort of building. Oh, bless you. And of course suits itself well to being created programmatically. Because if there's one thing that computers are good at, it's spitting out XML. So basically what this does is this creates a book that's based on the a book that's based on the directory that it's currently working on. So that gives it a volume number and a title based on the jurisdiction. And sets all that stuff up and creates a source URL. Then one thing I do is that if you want to have those really nice, if you have an iPad and in iBooks you get those really nice covers on your bookshelf, well, you have to actually have, that has to be an image that's in the EPUB file. So so these two lines are commented out here. Oh my! Oh. It's cat. No, it's up there.
No,
Yep.
it's not tapping. It's not being done.
It's not going on. Okay, be quiet up there.
Don't make fun of Elmer.
All right. So anyway, what we're in order to generate that that cover, which looks a lot like this, I needed to be able to put the volume number and title in. So I actually found a little program called like HTML to PNG or something like that. So what this does is this actually creates it actually calls out to a function that builds that image dynamically and then inserts it as the cover. And then we also throw in a cover page that's text-based because that always helps. And then you can throw in a forward, which has which can literally be any HTML page. I just build it here because it's basically static. So it has some links to a little bit of background about the Free Law Reporter and about RECOP. You could really put anything in there. And then it just basically walks through the files and uses the information, turns each file into a chapter in the book, basically, and then comes out of that, and then stashes everything where it needs to be stashed, zips it up as a .epub file, right in the directory, and then this is the page. What I do is actually create a page of a specific size, with a forced size. So it's 800 by 601, and then where the background is sort of this background image, and there's a block of text with the title info in it, and it creates that HTML page, and then I use this WKHTML to image will basically take a snapshot of that, but it does it on the server. It doesn't have to display it. It does it programmatically. It's real voodoo type stuff, but it works. And then that puts that all back together. And you can find those. The EPUB files sit in each one of the directories also. Hopefully this will work. Yeah. And that's basically, this is when you go through all that, this is what you get back out. The footnotes work. It doesn't mark any sites and stuff there. So back at the free law site, when you do that, when you run that search, you get a bunch of cases. You can download the EPUB volume that contains the case, if there is one, because some of these I actually have the paginated opinions in here too, but I'm not auto-generating ebooks from them because I've got this weird thing about programmatically creating page-for-page replications of the National Reporter series in ebook format that just tells me that there's a giant sue me stamped on that. So I'm working on something that just does them by court and and includes the sites and the page numbers, but doesn't actually recreate the entire an entire volume of the Southeast Reporter Second or whatever it is, page for page, with nifty little things that say copyrighted material redacted. Well, that's nice, but so and that could just be me. And then from here, you can also access each case, but we've actually styled them a little bit better here, based on the same style that John uses for the for his cases actually. So, and then that'll take us back. The other interesting thing that you can do is you can actually click on this, get EPUB, and this will take a second. It just did that gives you an error. That's because of the plugin that's actually in my Firefox browser that doesn't download it first. But what that should do is that will actually give you the free law. Will give you a special volume based on that search. So you would get the 87 documents as its own EPUB. So it builds those EPUBs on the fly in the background. Okay, so and if you're, I'm going to actually link this up under another tab on the, but we can actually look at, and we'll run that same search. This is what Solar returns to us as PHP. So you can see how it's got all kinds of interesting things. The dates, somebody pointed out, all the dates are Zulu. Yes. That's because the only dates that Solar recognizes as dates have to be Zulu. So it puts them in that format. So, of course, we don't know what hour the opinions came down. So they're all some date at midnight, effectively, of that day.
How often do you get updates
Yeah, every week. Yeah. Yeah, right now we're getting updates every week. They come out on Friday. I usually run them on Monday or so. Oh, I do have facets turned on. So this, one of the things that you can do is facet searches with Solr. So here's some facets. So of that case, this doesn't display on the regular page, but of those 87 results, we know that 8 of them were in the Ninth Circuit, and then that would allow you to drill down. There's also a date facet, which actually isn't too terribly helpful because there's a lot of dates. But you'll notice that some stuff, even though this is all from that RECOP feed, there's stuff as old as 2007 in here, probably in those paginated opinions that tend to go way back. And then there's a facet that runs on the court names, and here you can see what's actually a serious problem with the whole thing, right? We've got 1, 2, 3 instances right here for the 11th Circuit. And as you can see, each one's a little bit different. In the original code from 3 years ago when Carl Malamud released a big block of like 700,000 cases, the guy who wrote the original programming to process those cases started trying to sort all this out and gave up. And there's actually a note in the code that says, "I surrender," or something to that effect. Because there's no authority as to how these are supposed to be. And I've poked into it a little bit, and it's interesting. If you go to some of the circuit websites, you could find the court referred to a half a dozen different ways, depending on where you're at. I mean, the best source is probably to take however West refers to them, and use that, or use the Blue Book thing, and then create a table to look it up and all that stuff. And we'll get there someday. And obviously, we would need to do that in order to really make this truly effective, because then you get down here and you've got yet another one for the 11th Circuit. And then it also pulls out those highlighting fields, and so you can do things with that. And the highlighting is adjustable in terms of the number of highlighted fields and how big they are. Okay. So, questions? Cool. I got one more thing. I like doing that. Because another thing that we're doing with this, because I got to have Drupal, right? Everybody who knows me. There's got to be Drupal here somewhere. And indeed there is. What we're doing with Drupal is basically doing those searches. You have to run, you can't just search just copyright now, since I added all those paginated opinions in, because everywhere where they've removed copyrighted material, it says copyrighted material removed. So if you do a search for copyright, you get a skazillion hits. So you have to, at the very least, you have to say copyright not material. But then, of course, you're probably missing other stuff, but, it works for now for me. So here what we do is we're returning the same basic stuff, right? We've got, we do a search and we get back some basic information. And then what we're going to do is we click on one of those and you ignore the errors because that's a bug that I haven't fixed yet. And then this is now converted this into a Drupal node. So what I can do is I can go in and I can edit it for my class. Okay, so if I'm a faculty member, I can go in, I can find cases, I can edit them down. If this sounds familiar to anybody, shout it out. But and then what you can do is you can add them to. We'll create a new book. So we can create books. And so now we have a book that includes this case. And then somewhere floating around in the background here is the ability to, I think I need to, well, anyway, you can create stuff. And then you can actually then generate, you can actually turn those books into EPUBs too. So you can actually build case books in here and export them as EPUB. And that also, the module for doing that with Drupal will turn up on GitHub in the next, well, after I get back from vacation next week. So the beginning of July, I just need to clean up. I got to fix that error for one thing and take out some debugging stuff. But that's something that we would even run up against our version right now of Solr, up against our search engine, so that if you're running Drupal, you can install that module. In fact, they could do that sort of stuff locally. And that's questions? Yes, John. Yeah, there probably is, but as I was storming through it, I wasn't paying enough attention, and then I realized that was in there, and I probably should have, I should probably just take that out because I don't really care that much about that. I mean, there doesn't need to be a notation saying that stuff is vanished. Everybody should know enough to know that's not going to be there. So, yeah, and so, but. Solr, you can actually, since Solr updates pretty well on the fly, all I'll need to do is like reprocess those directories, pull out that stuff, and update that. Because everything has a unique ID, so I can identify it in the index and just to update that document in the index. So. Anybody else? Cool. And everybody should get a copy. It's really easy. All of this stuff takes up, well, everything through the end of April is on here. All the EPUBs takes up a hot 500 megabytes. Just the RECOP stuff that's come out so far is less than 10 gig. If you go back and grab the stuff that Carl released 3 years ago, which is 700,000 federal cases, going way back into the 50s and back, through whenever they ran through. Even with that's only about 10 or 12 gig. So it doesn't take up a lot of space to store it, to have it, and then you can figure out what to do with it like later, or make it some kind of ongoing project. Everybody should have some. No, you cannot. And the reason is because there aren't good citations to the slip opinions, especially, because and the bulk of the stuff right now is slip opinions. The citation fields are actually, you can search it by citations, but you're only going to get the newest paginated cases. When I add the other stuff that I've been working on that Carl released three years ago, and all that stuff all has sites, or most of it has sites. Does it all have sites?
That all has sites.
That all has sites. So that'll give you a citation field, and Solr's smart enough that you should be able to do a rough proximity of pin citing, because I should be able to tell Solr that if it gets a site and it can't find the number, the page number, to go back to the next lowest number and return that, so that it will at least not say, well, I can't find this. The other thing that needs to be done is that the sites need to be marked inside the cases, because they're not, and then that needs to be cross-referenced with like everything else. And then, because Solr then will do that faceted searching stuff, so that one of the things that I could facet on are all the sites in the document. So you could see where where other documents in the corpus cite that document. I've done some rough, I don't have it set up because it's really rough, but I've done some stuff like that with the docket numbers. Because some of the state court stuff has turned up in such a way that you can trace stuff through the, even in just the little bit that's been released, you can trace some state court stuff through the appellate system in a particular state based on the docket number. So if you actually do searches if you facet, you do searches for docket numbers, you can actually get the string of cases. And then I use those funky dates to arrange them in some approximate order of when they should have happened.
I mean, one of the things that I'm doing is I didn't bother making a facet for citation for similar reasons. But when I process, I actually do, the only processing I do to these XML docs is just put in that Unix date. And all of the display processing I do at display time. So it all gets saved as the pure XML. But what I'm also doing is for my resolver system, all of the paginated cases get their citations uploaded to the resolver database. And they're usable there, either via a special search box, which I haven't put in the search page yet, which I could though. But if, at some point these cases are going to start referring to each other, and if you click on those hot links that are in the embedded in our decisions, again, which happens at display time, they'll work. And as far as the slip opinions go, and until we have universal citation.
Right, once we have universal citation.
There's not going to be a citation for those cases anyway. But you can still search by name, by keyword, by date, by court.
The reason I guess I ask is one of the things that I see the reference that's occurring more now is as our adjuncts particularly are starting to go away from casebooks for practical reasons like they cost too much. They're handing out syllabi with citations or case names, and the students, of course, are going to Lexis and Westlaw to download them for the practical reason that it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And something like this, if you could work with them, might be an answer to that.
Right. Well, I mean, especially with what Elmer's doing, it's becoming more and more easy and practical for, say, a professor just to take those string of citations and make an ebook, and then hand that out.
Right, and one of the things you can do with ebooks, which in my next session, immediately following this one, shameless plug, where we're talking more about the ebook thing is, I mean, what I've got is a tool that will basically take a directory of HTML files, you feed it some metadata, and it'll go down that directory of HTML files and create an EPUB. So all you really need to do is get whatever materials you've got, get them into HTML, and then go to town. It's pretty straightforward. The other thing I wanted to mention about searching with Solr, we did this funky search. So it's copyright infringement as a phrase, but within 3. So it's copyright within 3 of infringement, but it's kind of smart. So it knows that infringed, upon his copyright is probably also something that I'm looking for, because infringed and infringement are there. So so you can actually do some pretty sophisticated searching with this as it is, even though it's not perfect. We're looking at things like More Like This that does more sophisticated text analysis to help sort of help you find stuff. So. Okay, Nick.
What do you're combining them into volumes for creating as EPUBs. Are you just combining all the ones that came on the same week as that volume?
Yeah. So one free law reporter is like everything from January. I think the first one came out like January 7th. So that's it. So that's one free law reporter, and then there's like all the jurisdictions that were in that in that particular file, and it just kind of goes that way, and that's basically how I've done it. Just to keep that, it just seemed like rather than like trying to, sort of, fiddle around too much, it seemed like a pretty linear way for me to keep track of what was going on. So, if it gets up to 9,008, whatever. Well, I've already. Well, the paginated opinions are actually in FLR second, so we're moving ahead. So, the 700,000 opinions from 3 years ago, those federal opinions will be in FLR third. So there we'll be up there. We'll be doing FLR 10th by the end of the year, and then
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah, I think we're done.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Oh, and for everybody who voted, DVI didn't work. Collecting